to the rollout by RetailSpaces. This is our first foray into the world of webcasting. So welcome. If some of you came on a little bit earlier, we had a couple of hiccups there, but hopefully that'll be the only one so far. It's really awesome seeing a lot of names and people that we're used to seeing at our live events. And as we all know, unfortunately, we cannot be doing those for the time being, hopefully sooner rather than later. But we realize that Influence Group, and for those of you that are signing on for the first time, aren't familiar with RetailSpaces or to know about our organization, Influence Group, we bring together people in the retail world, specifically around store development, store design, and construction, to talk about the transformation that's been happening in this industry for a long time. But of course, now that's been accelerated tenfold by COVID-19. So our goal with this webinar, we're calling it Webcast, and it's not novel, but the idea is afterwards we can convert this into a podcast. But is it for it to be interactive? I'm sure, can I get a show of hands or how many people have been on webinars recently where it's just a bunch of people talking and maybe you have some decent questions and they don't get answered? We want this to be the opposite of that. We're trying to make this like a call-in sports radio live show. Make it a little bit fun, add a little element of surprise or danger. But we've got a really great, great guests today. I don't want to say panel because a panel just sounds like something stuffy. We have, going to bring up the slide right now, which we had at the intro here. We have Kim Ellis joining from GameStop. Kim is Senior Vice President of Development for GameStop. She joined there about 4 months ago. I'm sure a lot of you coming on know Kim. She's been in the industry for quite a while. Dating back to, she was head of development for Blockbuster. From Blockbuster, and I'm going to get the transition here wrong probably, but she was also spent a good amount of time at Regis, Supercuts, 10,000 hair salons, was also head of development for Panda Restaurant Group. And prior to going to GameStop, she was with iFly. So she has experience in retail, restaurant, service business, as well as entertainment. We also have Chris Lytle joining us. Chris is the global partner lead of shopping for this small company called Google. And last but not least, the Oracle of Ohio, I got that wrong, Lee Peterson. A lot of you know him out there, of course, in the retail world. And for people that have been to retail spaces or restaurant spaces, you might have seen Kim, Chris, or Lee on one of our stages. So without further ado, let's welcome them to the stage. Let's see if we can get this to work. Oh, there we go. We got 1, 2, voila.
Good morning. All right.
There's Kim. All right. So far, so good. All the rehearsal worked out so far.
It all pays off in the end.
Thank you guys for joining us. Again, this is new to us. I'm sure it's new to everybody. I mean, going on Zoom calls, I think we've all been on a million of those over the past few weeks. But coming onto something like this to bring the industry together. I mean, we had a good, close to 500 people registered for this, which we're pretty excited. And again, it's not about the numbers. We have some excellent retailers signed up from here, and of course, a lot of our excellent supporters and sponsors. So the format we want to do here is we want to talk about the role of stores in this new era, right? And there's a lot of things to talk about. The way we want to go through this, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking to each one of you, and then we'll go into a bigger conversation. But then as we discuss with Jason, we want to bring the audience in because I'm sure they've got a lot of questions they may have for you, but also questions they're looking for answers for themselves. So I'm going to start with the Oracle of Ohio first, Lee Peterson. Lee, you sit at the kind of center of a lot of retailers with the work that you do at WD Partners. Primarily our audience here for RetailSpaces are people that are responsible for store development, design, construction, facilities management. Let's talk about reopening stores. I think that's the first thing we want to talk about here because that's what everybody's in the process of doing. From your perspective, what do you think is the most important thing that people should be focusing on right now as they're beginning to reopen their stores?
Well, I don't think there's any question that we're going to go through sort of a tippy toe phase for the next couple of 3 months. And I've been out of retail now a couple of times this week because Ohio opened up early. And, what I saw wasn't, like you saw in the grocery stores kind of over every one of us has seen the grocery stores over the last couple of months. There was, to the untrained eye, there was a little bit of spacing. The employees had masks. And I got the feeling that, the merchandise looked kind of the same. A lot of the stores looked really very similar. Customers have masks, things like that, but nothing sort of shocking. So what I saw, what I witnessed, and what I think is going to happen anyway for the next 3 months is we're going to go through a period of learning. Do we absolutely have to have sneeze guards, or what do you do when somebody comes in and refuses to wear a mask? How much merchandise do we need? Are we going to do 50% of the business we did before? Are we going to do 5% of the business before? And then what happens to logistics? So there's that period, I think, followed by, an acceleration of the things that we know, probably the fourth quarter of this year. So I think initially we're really in a test phase, and if you go out to retail now, you can really feel it. And the customers are the same way. They're kind of touching things and looking through and sticking their nose in a store going, is this a place I want to go into? So test and then learn and then accelerate would be my answer.
Okay, so I want to go to Kim for a second, but the one thing I did forget to do, and you hit on a few things that remind me that I forgot to do this, is I want to do a few polls here. I think this will give us an idea of kind of where our audience is. The first one here is about what shape do you guys, our audience right now, think the economy is going to recover? Is it going to be V-shaped, U-shaped? We've talked about the Nike swoosh, or a W-shape. So I'm going to do this poll live now, and we'd love everybody to get their, see the responses we get on that. And we'll see. Yeah, if you guys don't, if the poll didn't come up on your screen, which I think it should be in the right-hand side.
Is the Nike swoosh a double entendre?
Well, I didn't want to put the L shape, which some people are talking about, which is a little scary.
Yeah, a what? Elephant?
L-shaped, as in not coming back up.
Oh my God.
Well, JetBlue did say that, which I thought was pretty. That's what they're saying in terms of recovery for airlines. All right, so interesting. So we've got right now on the screen, we've got 81% of people. We've got 40% of people are saying a W shape. So we're going to come back, but they're expecting it to drop again, and then of course come back. But 35% is on the Nike swoosh. That we're not going to see this, V recovery that a lot of people were expecting or hoping for. Okay, interesting there. So we've got a decent response rate there. Now the next poll is following up on that is face masks. We've seen in the news, and I know this is new, and Kim, you and I spoke about this yesterday. I think it was 21 days that you said it turns for people to get used to something, for it to become a habit and not feel foreign. Yeah. I want to know not from your retail perspective, but as a consumer, as an individual, as a human being, would you choose to shop at one retailer over another if that retailer required customers to wear face masks? All right. So without getting the full results in, the majority of people would prefer to go to one retailer over another if they're requiring their customers to wear face masks. And there's still a percentage of people that don't care. So I think that's a good segue to kind of go into a conversation with you, Kim, just in particular. And I know that certain things maybe you can't say at this stage. We understand that, and we appreciate you joining us. But from a GameStop perspective, and just from your perspective, I mean, you've been in retail for a number of years. First question I have: how does this compare to the economic crisis or any other major financial situation we've had? And then, of course, would be curious to know, kind of looking at those responses, what is GameStop's approach to reopening stores?
Good morning, everybody, and I hope everyone's healthy and safe. And Michael, thank you again for the opportunity to get with our colleagues and discuss this chaotic time and how we're all navigating the waters. So GameStop still has a third of its stores that remain closed. We were fortunate enough that we sell quite a product line that is essential to the needs of people who are still working from home and learning from home now. So there's a whole PC section that that we have in our stores that most people don't know about. We're not just a game store. So we were allowed to keep, unless we were closed by state mandate, we were innovative, and we were able to quickly evolve to a delivery at door mechanism. So our door is a pickup window. So we've been able to enjoy at least keeping some of those stores open, and having to do so safely, of course, for our employees and for our customers. So as we are now reopening, we're reopening with of course the masks, with the gloves. We've had to turn our trading business off because that, of course, is something that you take personally from your home and then you're bringing it in. We've had to figure out how to sanitize anything that's coming, any touch points actually that we have in our store. We, like many retailers, are trying to become more interactive, and so we've put interactive elements in our store where you are able to touch and control the headsets and really test them. We're not able to go into that right now. We're moving into trying and buying. You're able to try your games at the store now. You're not able to do that at any of our competitors, and you used to only be able to try a couple of games at our stores. Now you can try everything. So we're moving towards experiential. That's about our future, and COVID has certainly put a road bump in the way. So we're now putting plexi as we're opening. We have a five-phased approach to opening stores. So we're either closed or we move to delivery at door, and that's all mechanized by a buy online, pick up in store. So you can't come into the store with your credit card and buy a game. You can't do that at door. You have to do that online. Then we have limited access. Then we'll have full access to stores, and then full access with trading. So we're moving through a 5-phase approach with making sure that we're using all the safety mechanisms in place for our workforce. What's interesting about our workforce is they're waiting to come back. They're really waiting for our stores to open up. They can't wait to get back in there. So whereas I think some retailers are finding it challenging to find employees, which is interesting with a 20% unemployment rate, our employees are dedicated and they're true gamers. So if there's one thing that GameStop has it going for it is we have the right people that are behind the counter that are servicing the gaming public. Hopefully that answers your questions, Michael.
No, that's good. So, one thing is GameStop. How many stores do you guys have domestically?
3,500.
3,500, and a lot of those are in malls. What's your take right now on the malls reopening? What is I know every state and every mall's different, but with a lot of the anchors and even the restaurants not coming in, of course, the foot traffic is down. And, there's a lot of things outside of retail that are going to impact that too, right? So if we're talking about a lot more people working from home and, we've seen a lot of large corporations already making announcements that people aren't coming back in the fall, or Twitter saying not forever. That's going to really change major cities. So, I mean, you're someone that has a really good understanding of real estate. How do you see this pandemic playing out for real estate over the next few years?
So as you said, GameStop is, we're in a lot of open space centers. We're also in a lot of malls. For domestically, about 3,500 stores. We're in about 500 to 600 malls. The mall business is probably the business that I personally worry about the most. Look, there's a report that came out that we chatted about yesterday, if I could bring up, about the 3 industries that are probably most at risk right now. Number 1 is movie theaters. Number 2 is department stores. And number 3 is the office space sector. All 3 of those are going to impact everybody's stores, not just GameStop's, but everybody's stores, and especially if you're mall-based. So starting with the movie industry, if I could touch on this really quickly, because of my background with Blockbuster, I'm a little bit, I'm a little overly sensitive to it, I might admit. So for those who are of the appropriate age to recall, there used to be a rental window. It went to the movie theaters, then it went to rental, then it went to retail. The studios closed that window. What's happening right now, what we've seen over COVID, is that the studios close the window on the theaters for several movies, and the movie theater industry is now at risk, because if they continue to do that, that takes away a huge revenue stream, as it did for Blockbuster. Was the first nail in the coffin, not the last one. And here we are with the movie theaters again. Most movie theaters are mall-based. Most movie theaters have spent a tremendous amount of money over the last 10 years trying to make their theaters more experiential, like we all have as retailers. We've all needed to do that and adjust to the millennial who wants to shop us a certain way. The theaters going away in the malls is concerning. Anchors not reopening in malls is concerning. I think brick and mortar's not going away. I don't believe in an omni-channel because everyone who started the omni-channel is now doing brick and mortar as well. I think it proves that they coexist really, really well. I think what we just learned at GameStop is that we were able to leverage our online to support our brick and mortar in a tough, chaotic time. They're going to stay married to each other. One's not going to win over the other. When you see GameStop, and I just have to mention this because it is something that we're doing strategically, we are de-densifying our portfolio. We're not closing stores because of COVID. We're not closing stores because of technology and poor performance. We're closing stores because we have too much of an overlap of stores. Now, taking movie theaters that potentially close, taking department stores that are closing, and taking an office sector that's going to look very different. When some of our stores are rely on high office density, and that's not there anymore, or it's not going to come back for a while, that performance of those stores are going to be impacted. So we have to be thinking about this more strategically. I have a very great relationship that I enjoy with Buxton, and I've already started a conversation with them with regard to how I need to look at our portfolio at GameStop in the future relative to those three risks, and there are far more of them.
Excellent. Kim, I have a lot of questions for you there, but I want to go to Chris for a minute, and then we'll come back into a larger thing. I want to come back to a few things. But Chris, you're on the outside here. I mean, you're a tech guy, and you've been with Google now for about close to 9 years. Google sits on a tremendous amount of data, right? So I'm just curious, through these times, over the past few months, is there anything consumer related that stuck out to you guys right now that, could be interesting to share with people that are responsible for physical retail stores?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, because we do have such a broad consumer base, you can really get a temperature for what people are thinking and doing when you look at, the trends in search. And so we have Google Trends, which is an awesome tool. It's publicly available to everyone. And when you go in there, you'll see some interesting trends in that case. Lee and I spent, the past year and a half going around talking about curbside pickup. And it was a kind of a wonky retail term, right? It was something that vendors talked about. It was something that, some SVPs of innovation had heard about, and grocery was digging into. But from a consumer perspective, you had to explain to them what curbside meant. And so if you go to Google Trends and you do a search for curbside pickup, you'll see it went from the opposite of the L, which I don't know, the straight nothing and then straight up in the air. And so I think what's amazing is that we have a term that was really kind of an industry term in January that is now a thing with consumers just a few months later. And I know it's great to say that, that crises only accelerate existing trends, but I think this is a great example of that. I mean, all the things that Lee and his Churchillian vision, proclaiming you're going to need this. And now he's the man for the times because it's absolutely come to be true. And on the Google side, we've tried to really address that pretty quickly. So when you do searches now on local stores, you'll see that we'll start to denote alternative fulfillment mechanisms. We offer curbside, same day delivery, all those kind of options, because that's what we see people are searching for. The other thing that's really exciting when you look at trends is there's a definite interest in supporting local business. And of course, what that means is, kind of varies to some degree, because in some cases, somebody might be searching for, something close to them. On the other hand, somebody might have a real heart for trying to help out locally based businesses. But if you do searches for support local business, that's another one that's just through the roof. So again, the way we tend to look at things, we see the trends coming through, and then we try to have the products that basically support those trends, right? We want folks to find what they're looking for.
Got it. Got it. And, you know, so I've seen a number of presentations that you've given. I've always been fascinated by them. Normally doing NRF. You've done them with Lee. And, you know, one thing that I saw, and it was a couple of years ago, and maybe you can talk about, you know, I think 5 years ago, we were all saying that 5 years from now, driverless cars are going to be a thing. It hasn't really happened just yet. But Google owns Waze. And, you know, I saw a presentation that you were part of, and we were talking about the future of Waze, that you'll be in your car that's driving itself, and that you're going to go to GameStop and you could, you know, put in your order on your screen, because we're all going to have screens in our cars. And I guess maybe we're a little bit further out. But, you know, looking to the future, and I think that's when we bring events like retail spaces and restaurant spaces together, is that people are always looking to understand where things are far out there. And you and Lee have done the presentations, obviously, in BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store. And I guess now that's BOPAS, buy online, pick up at store, because you're not allowed to go in. You know, what are things for retailers right now? Of course, we're talking about getting stores reopened. It's the transparency and the trust thing that they have to overcome to get consumers back in. But accelerating that a few years down the line from a Google standpoint, I know that you guys have the feature now, and I recognize this. I'm right now in Orlando. I decided to leave New York City for obvious reasons. But I wanted to get my daughter, it was her birthday last week, a Razor scooter. So I noticed on Google, you can just type in and say Razor scooter and available near me. Now, unfortunately, the only ones that showed up were Target and Walmart, because they're the only stores that are open. But tell us about that in the future and how that can be integrated, and what's people building stores and retailers should know. Because I've also, and I'm throwing a lot at you, I've also heard you say that in the future, we may not have native apps, that the web's going to be so good, you don't need to download a Dunkin' Donuts app. Is that still, you know, Google's vision for the future?
Yeah, we can. Let me take the last point first, which is just the question of the app. I mean, I still think that we see interest in apps, but you know, I love Chick-fil-A, so I've got the Chick-fil-A app. But how many fast food apps am I really going to have on my phone? So I think that you're always going to have your app penetration for your core users. But again, we continue to see the capability of progressive web apps to do many of the things that we used to see, you know, that would require a native app. So I think, broadly speaking, you're still going to see some apps, but you're going to continue to see the growth of progressive web apps too. But the other part about, like, what we really see is the future for local, I think the key word is discoverability. If I have committed to building out a location, I've picked the site, I've hired WD to come and have a fantastic shopper experience, I've picked I'm like GameStop, I have the most knowledgeable, passionate staff. It'd be a darn shame if somebody was searching for products I had in that store and not know that it was there, right? And so what we're really focused on, what we think the opportunity for local is being able to have users go to Google and search for inventory throughout wherever they are locally. And when you think about when you go to some of the big e-com sites, you feel pretty confident that I'm going to be able to search all different types of categories and pull up all these different great sellers and all those things. We want to bring that same experience to local. So the more that we have access to folks' inventory data and just really telling us what products they have in what stores, we're going to make that available to shoppers, so that when they're searching for a particular brand or they're searching for a particular essential product, they're going to be able to discover which merchants near them are really the folks that are offering those products and offering them quickly. And, you know, we talk to a lot of grocers who really take a lot of pride in their local assortment, where, you know, you might have a grocer might have 5 locations in a city, and the local assortment might vary by 30% in each of those stores, because they really want to speak to that hyper local audience. And like, I'm here in Atlanta, I'm in between a Publix on North Avenue and a Publix at Ansley Mall. They're very different audiences, and the assortments are very different. So the key thing is we want folks to be able to find the products in the right store. And it's more important than ever when it comes to coronavirus, because people want intentional trips. I don't want to go to 3 places to find the thing I'm looking for. I want to go to one place and find the thing I'm looking for. And then likewise, you know, whereas we found that retailers used to like all kinds of foot traffic. Come on in and maybe you'll buy something. These days, that's very much not the case. And in particular with grocers, they don't really want folks coming in looking for things that aren't there. So what it's all about is, both from the shopper side and the merchant side, how do we create more intentional shopping journeys that start with knowledge of what's actually in the store?
Perfect. Yeah, I agree with you there. So now I want to open up and just kind of have a larger conversation. And it goes back to, what everyone hit on, but Kim, you hit on it there, is we've all been talking about experience, right, over the last few years. Experience, experience, experience. That's how we're going to get people to come back into retail stores. And, some people in the design community experiences, having a flagship store with all the bells and whistles, but really comes down to what's the customer's looking for. And convenience is part of that experience. And now at the top of that experience, again, is safety and transparency. When I look at the list of retailers, people that registered for this, and I don't know if they're in here, I'd love to, again, say hello in the chat or throw it, but I saw SoulCycle on the list. Like, what's the future for SoulCycle when you're 12 inches apart from somebody on a bike? Beauty, makeup, Sephora, Ulta. The whole experience of coming into a Sephora store is being able to go in and have your makeup done and to touch and try out new products. I mean, I bring my young daughters in, like, they're too young to buy makeup, but they love going in. The associates are wonderful, and they really help the experience. But, Lee, I want to show a video. Lee mentioned to us earlier on a call about Alibaba. And Alibaba, with their department stores in China are reopened, and they're doing certain things with live streaming. And just want to show that video here now. But then we'll come back and I just want to talk kind of in general about what does the future of experience mean, in this new era. So bear with me, and here we go. So, Lee, explain that to us.
Well, I talked to some Alibaba people just yesterday, and they thought it was really apropos. And I told them that I was going to do this, so they said, "Hey, we have some new information for you, and maybe something you guys would want to know." They have a department store called In Time. There's 65 department stores, 35 different cities. But they started live streaming pre-COVID, but then during COVID and post, for them, they started live streaming up to 200 to 220 times a day. So if you figure that out and the store's open, maybe 10 hours because of reduced hours at first, you're talking about every 10 minutes they were live streaming some kind of product, makeup, doing virtual makeup, doing like product testing, showing how things work. For GameStop, like super relevant, I think, like how do these games work? What do they do? If you could see that and see it happening. Subsequently, what happened was they got a 50% increase in foot traffic from 1 month to the next month to the next month. So from March to April, 50% plus. From April to May, 50% plus. And they just continued to live stream. So it was something I hadn't really thought about in terms of technology because, you think of buy online, pick up in store, you think of some of the obvious things and the safety things, obviously, that we're gonna have to do within the next 3 months. But the live streaming, I thought, was a really good way to connect, and a technology that we just don't use enough, or we haven't really kind of pushed it enough. But 200 times a day is pretty prolific. So I thought that was really good information and maybe useful.
Got it. Yeah, I definitely think it's innovative to be doing that, and it's pretty much low cost. We have some questions here I'd like to go from people, the questions from people that don't want to go live. And one is from, for Kim, what do you attribute store associates' desire to get back to working in the store? What do you attribute to them wanting to go back? Because, you read a lot about retailers, and Kim, just, your mic's off. a lot of associates are scared. I mean, not a lot, a good number of them, specifically, of course, in areas with big outbreaks like New York City.
I think this is probably fairly unique to GameStop. We hire gamers. I mean, we really, truly hire gamers. The big difference in, buying a game from Walmart and Target is you got to find the guy who has the key, and he won't be able to spell the word game, maybe, and certainly maybe not be a gamer at all. We really do hire gamers behind the counter. So I've got a 22 and an 18-year-old. So I find myself in GameStop now because we're looking at innovative ideas versus my buying the game, still trading them though. But you know what, when you go in and all those years that I've gone into Blockbuster GameStop as a consumer versus working there, it's because the guy behind the counter, the gal behind the counter knows about the games. What do I need to get for a 13-year-old, an 8-year-old? Is it going to be too violent? They lead you the right way. So our folks like to game, and they'd rather be doing it behind the counter and serving customers who game, and then going home and gaming themselves. Yeah,
and perfect time to bring up something on the screen right here, which I saw earlier, if the technology doesn't fail me, is this meme.
Yep.
Right? Gamers, this was like perfect for them. They get to stay home and play games. More people are like, what am I going to do? And it's like, wait, I get to stay home and play video games all day?
Kind of an interesting aside that, I remember my husband and I used to joke about our kids, and I'm sure that this has got to, it's got to reach some folks out there who've got some kids who are gaming. I want them outside. I want them socializing. And they actually are socializing. It's just a different kind of socializing that they're doing. There's 30 people in their head at one time, like there are many people on our screen and on this call. So we're starting to understand what the gamers are really doing. They seem like they're isolated at home. They're really not. They're probably being more social than we are.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny. I don't think any of us as parents, or most of us, have ever heard of Discord. But Discord is like the social media app that all of your sons are using. And I'm sure and a fair number of your daughters as well. But, if I want to reach my kid, I hit him up on Discord because that's where I can find him. Not his phone, not email, not in his room, but on Discord.
Yeah. So in a moment, we're probably going to start bringing on some live guests here. So to our panelists, don't get a little weirded out, but it brings an element of surprise and spontaneity. So people that are coming live, make sure this is a family-friendly show. But actually, you can say whatever you want. This is this is the new normal, right? So we can change the rules. But before we have that next question coming up, someone had a question. It's Allison Cumming from RS Engineering. Experiential retail, and this is a great one. Think of like the Samsung store down the meatpacking district. They did an amazing job, got a lot of press. Like those types of stores, what does it mean for them? Also, when we talk about showroom stores or a lot of the online retailers like Warby Parker that went from brick and mortar retail because people want to come in and try on glasses. I mean, that's, those are things that are going to have to be totally, it's going to change, or maybe not. Maybe it's just a temporary thing. But any suggestions, or I guess I'll throw that one to you, Lee.
Yeah, well, I think without question, there has to be a reconfiguration of the ROI model, and this, to Chris's point before, like any crisis is going to accelerate trends, and one of the trends before was that this had to happen. Like, how do you measure stores? How do you measure stores' performance when somebody comes in a store, looks around, and they go home and buy something online? Like the store had a lot to do with that, but they get no credit for that. So I think all that has to change. So when Samsung opened, as an example, it was almost a flagship type of store. What they told us was that if their sales in the zip codes elevate, then the store is being successful. So, what makes a store successful and what makes a store not successful has completely changed and needs to be reconfigured. And then in terms of like somebody like Warby Parker going to retail, I completely agree with Kim that, the retail physical shopping is not going to go away, but you definitely have to make it more interesting. And the .com guys have a super advantage in that they know exactly where their clusters of sales are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So they can open a store right in the middle of that cluster. But we were talking about this. I heard Mickey Drexler on a webinar yesterday, speaking of webinars, and he said, I don't think anybody should have more than 50 stores. Now, I don't know that I agree with that number, but it's an interesting perspective. But if Warby Parker starts to go to 500 stores, you know that they've probably gotten a little bit out of line. So I think you'll see Warby Parker, people like that, .com people go physical, but in a very limited way compared to, let's say, the 90s when, you had to have 500 stores and your CFO was driving you to 1,000 for unknown reasons other than, stock increase.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you bring up something that I had on the list here to talk about. And it's a session you actually ran at RetailSpaces 2 years ago, and which subject was, why stores? I mean, in this day and age, you have to really have an explanation for that, and not just to please, shareholders and, growth targets. So, I'd love to, Kim, we talked on earlier, you were a Blockbuster. We all know how that ended. But that, and with that being said, that was around a time when, no one even could imagine where we are today with technology, with Netflix and everything there. But we've seen it happen a lot over the last few years in terms of companies that their model or their product has not become, say, relevant. So when we talk about gaming, you can purchase all your games on the device. You don't have to actually get the disc anymore or the cartridge. When someone asks that for GameStop, what is the, what again, going back to some of the things you said before, what are you doing with, or what is, not you, but what is GameStop doing to be ahead of that? I mean, Best Buy's done a great job with pivoting and changing how they operate their business and services. What does GameStop have in store that you could share?
That I can share, right? So we are publicly operated, so I have to keep some things very close to the vest, but I can share with you what I've been there, by the way, about 9 weeks. So I'm still quite new to GameStop. We have some things that are in laboratory, right? So everybody's testing the experiential elements. So we had some things that we were testing in Tulsa, and of course those I wouldn't even say testing, it was more of a laboratory, and it was social gaming. Again, the interactive buy before you buy, which is new to the gaming industry and to us. We have co-op couches where you can come in the front of the store and you can play some of the Nintendo games. We have the tables in the back for board games, but the biggest addition that we're in laboratory with right now is the e-social gaming. So there are actually bays where you're playing, or if there's a big launch of a particular game that comes out, we can do a game launch in a particular store, and that whole store is then dedicated to that game for that night, and it maybe is on 8 different screens, but there may be 24 people playing it in the back of the store. So it becomes more of an experiential store to go into, and the front part still remaining retail in the store, but the back is really about the experiential part, and then some elements of your consumer experience are experiential as well. Again, that's in laboratory. We have some mock stores, and we're looking at continuing that rollout. Think that that's still going to be something that's important as we move forward, but we're going to have to do it with safety precautions and trying to figure out where we roll that out. By the way, so kind of back to what we already touched on. I think that there was probably some thinking, at least it was my thinking, that this was a proper rollout, the right laboratory for it, the right test is probably a mall environment. I would tell you I'm rethinking that at this juncture.
Got it.
Understanding that that's the right place right now to invest the money on to further our incubation of that concept.
Got it. Yeah, that sounds like obviously the right way to go. Especially even more so prior to the pandemic, but we're going to get through this. So it looks like we're having some technical issues with bringing it. It was going to be Susan Hecht from SMS Assist was who we were trying to bring online, but we're having some tech issues. So I'm going to read Susan's question. It's to you, Kim. It's specifically about, you guys have reopened stores internationally, Italy, Germany, Austria. What lessons have you learned overseas that have helped make the process easier in the US? And what differences did you experience between non-US and US openings, specifically in regards to response by government and by returning customers?
Susan, hi, how are you? It's been a long time since I've seen you, and I still can't, but we'll have to catch up. You know what? I don't know that I'm an appropriate person to answer that question 9 weeks in. I mean, we've seen other countries open sooner, but that's more about the wave of how coronavirus has hit the world. We're open in Australia, doing really good business in Australia. We're closed in other countries, and then we have a strategy of how we were already going to, what we were going to do in some of those countries with regard to ongoing operations. Strategic operations, that had nothing to do with COVID. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that as appropriately as I liked. There's our operator probably could with regard to his discussions with the operators in the other countries. I have been, as you might suspect, inundated with rents and renegotiations and store openings. So that's been primarily my focus.
Yeah. So I have another question, and this is, I guess, to everybody. It's from Chris Delusky. If you guys know Chris, Chris was with.
Hey, Chris.
I think he was with Italy, and he was with. Geez, I have the watch. Anyway, given the quarantine environment, how do you guys see the difference in store design, layouts, and even quarantine zones in the back of the house for return goods with respect to utilizing square footage for returns? And will we see more stores stop the partnership returns, like Kohl's for Amazon, et cetera? Lee, I'm going to throw that one to you.
Well, I can relate to.
Shinola was nothing.
Yeah.
I think where Chris was.
I miss you, Chris. Let's put it that way.
I appreciate that.
I can relate to what I saw, and again, it was a little bit of a tippy toe thing, but I saw stores absolutely a little bit more spaced out. So I think that one of the first things is a SKU rat. Like how many SKUs do you actually need on a store? I remember the day when stores were packed and merchandise was falling off the shelves. That there was none of that, and there was a lot of restrictions in terms of dressing rooms. You go in, the merchandise comes out, so you definitely. There's something I didn't see, but you definitely, you raise a good point, because I think you would definitely have to set up something different in the back room for merchandise that you're going to have to lay out. Steaming, I heard works so you have a steaming section, and probably just an ongoing production of people come in and try things on, or returns come into the store from online. You're going to have to steam those and put those back out in the store. So, back rooms could become, especially for specialty retail, a little bit larger in order to accommodate that, and also it fits right in with having less SKUs in the store itself.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know if did I miss part of that?
No, I think you answered. I mean, Chris could, or anybody can follow up in the chat there if you guys have additional questions specific to that thing. But in the meantime, I wanted to go back to you, Chris, again on the technology side of things. I read an article yesterday that was talking about, again, with reopening stores, and, we've seen everything from grocery talking about allowing, a certain amount of people being allowed back into stores. And some retailers, of course, are scheduling when they can come in, people lining up outside of stores. Now, that's going to get old pretty quickly. So, people, of course, are going to defer to technology. So if you're coming up to the store, you can reserve a time when to go. When your time to come back in. But I was reading articles talking about voice assistants, and we've talked about, Alexa, Google Voice, all these different platforms to do that. How do you see the future of that integrating with, brick and mortar?
Well, I think the whole notion of like reserving of reservations was big for Google, prior to all this, and it's only accelerated. We did a lot of work over the past number of years to enable people to make reservations from directly within the Google My Business panel. And for those of you who don't know what Google My Business is, it's like when you do a search for Best Buy near me, and you click on the one little result, and it's got like the phone number and the directions and hours and all that good stuff. But that's definitely one of the areas where we've seen folks get engaged at that level.
We do have some really good questions coming in, and you guys can see them in there too. Bobby Graham is asking, UVC lighting to disinfect product after interaction and testing product. I know a lot of our partners in lighting are of course, are able to support that. Has anybody been testing that? Kim, have you looked into that yet?
I'm unsure, but I'm going to go take that back to operation. I saw the question there as well, so I'm going to take that back to operations and dig a little bit deeper into that. I don't think that we're using lighting as part of our
Disinfection.
Lighting as part of our disinfection, but I'm not sure about it.
I think one of the first things is you have to figure out if it actually works.
Yeah,
that's probably number one. Does it really work, and to what degree? And then, what do you have to do it? You have 2 to 4 to 6 sides of a sweater. So, how does that work? It's a really good idea. And it brings up, to me, a larger point about innovation, that the time for being laggard on innovation is gone. I mean, something like that UV, every retailer, especially apparel retailer, should be testing that.
Michael, real quick, just to kind of follow up what Lee is saying. On the one hand, and Kim can probably agree with this, that while there is an imperative for innovation, when I talk to retailers, they have every vendor with their COVID solution rushing to the same people at the same time. And folks like Kim, as she just described, she's dealing with rent issues and just day-to-day operational things. So it's just a really challenging time. And I think for a lot of the retailers I speak to, their head is spinning with all the things that they are being told they must do.
Yeah.
By state,
I think you're
right, and sometimes by county.
Right, Chris. I think there's like I said earlier, there's like a 3-month segment here where retailers are just going to try to figure out how to operate, or how do we operate now is more the question.
Yeah.
And those operations really are, from our team, and we're on calls twice a day. I mean, it's different by state, by county, by local mandate. When they say you can open, the local authorities can come and say, well, I know that's what the state said, but we disagree. And what we do is lock our doors and close.
So we only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we can get through a few of these questions here. I know we're kind of jumping around, but this is one from Burlington. So what are your thoughts? And this is to you guys, but again, if anybody has answers or thoughts on these questions in the chat, please go at it. What are your thoughts on the off-price industry in terms of retail stores without an e-com business? And it is based on the customer experience with the treasure hunt. So I think if you guys saw in the news this week that TJX now, relaunched their e-com, but their whole thing is that they weren't really, that wasn't their thing, right? It's the whole treasure hunt. We do know that there's a lot of retailers now that are going to be offloading a lot of apparel that they couldn't sell in the spring, and who's going to get it? TJX, I guess. But yeah, any thoughts on that for the retailers that are behind the curve on e-com?
I think that there's a tremendous bifurcation of retail right now. So you're in the middle, you're in a lost place, but where they are or where discounters are is a really good place to be. Like the Mickey Drexler's rule of 50 stores does not apply to discounters, dollar stores, Walmart, and even Target to a degree. So I think it's kind of cool, that they would say, hey, you got to come and see what we got, because you know what, tomorrow we're not going to have it. But of course, like a Five Below and all these guys, you're going to spend $20, $15. So that for consumers, I think that adage and the whole discount element, like Goodwill stores, Salvation Army stores, is another conversation. I mean, those are going to be just fun, cool places to shop and spend $15. But that's different to me than 2/3 of the rest, maybe more of the rest of retail is undergoing tremendous transformation.
I think it depends on the region too, because when you do the analysis and you see people have very different fear levels about the coronavirus in general, based on where you are, based on your leanings, all kinds of things. So it could be that a place that does, require a treasure hunt does a lot better in places where people are generally culturally less concerned about it. And it might be a tough sell in New York for a real long time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any big city, I think, is going to be a whole different ball game.
Not Atlanta.
Rural areas.
Yeah.
Not Atlanta.
We're rolling down here.
Yeah, so the one more thing is, I see additional questions again about reopening and frictionless transaction. Lynn Pollock from Core States Group is asking now about, what retailers are looking at for large volume customers to check out efficiently. Because that's the thing, right? You don't want to have people having to come in if they're going to want to come back to stores, and you're going to make it a hassle. then that's, then we've seen the things on the news already where people, if you saw the one in Massachusetts where that ice cream parlor reopened and the guy shut it down after a day because the customers were berating their staff because they were making people, having to line up outside the store. We don't want to get into that. That's an operations topic. But again, people not coming in with masks and you're saying they got to come in and people are like, you can't tell me what I got to wear a mask. Those are things for, I guess, another episode of the rollout.
Yeah.
We've got only a few minutes left. And, a lot of people in our audience aren't the ones that are going to be calling the shots on which direction a lot of retailers choose to go in, right? A lot of them have been behind the curve on e-com, on BOPIS, on, turning stores into fulfillment centers, right? I saw the other day that Bath & Beyond is converting a lot of their stores, portion of stores into fulfillment centers. That's heading in the right direction.
Hallelujah, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, and Lee, I know you guys have been talking about that for quite a bit.
Yeah.
I want to end this kind of quickly in just a minute. Chris, understand that the audience, again, primarily are made up of heads of real estate, store development, design. What is the one thing that you think that they should be focused on? Not just because of coronavirus, but, that you think that they should be aware of from a consumer's, what is the consumer looking for?
They're looking for local assortment. I mean, again, I don't want to simplify it, but I do think it's a matter of discoverability. And I know that's not as much of the design element, but I do think that you win with having items that are unique to your store that are available locally. And I think it's going to be a golden age of assortment category managers for sure. I think that's where a lot of retailers are going to win. So having that unique assortment that you might not be able to find online quickly and letting folks know that you have it.
Yeah. Kim, what do you think?
Accessibility to product, right? So online's gonna work. What we've got to do is still create an environment. I think all of us, it's not just GameStop, create an environment that's going to be safe for people to come back into, because we still want our stuff now, right? Mm-hmm. Tomorrow, Amazon might get it to us tomorrow. It's not now. So that's what brick and mortar is here to serve. And that's what we're going to have to make sure that we understand. We spent a lot of time trying to just understand this millennial customer. Now we have to understand this new millennial customer and for GameStop specifically, the ones coming up behind them.
Yeah. And on that topic of millennials, I mean, that's another one that we're looking to talk about because we hit on this earlier. I mean, the millennials is that one generation that's been through a lot, right? The economic crisis, that, financially, the millennials were saying with controlling the dollars, that's going to change now, potentially. Lee, what do you think is the one thing that everyone should be focused on right now?
It's really hard for me to get over employee safety. I mean, that's a huge factor right now, and I think that attracts customers as well. If you look in a store and you see the employees are wearing gloves and they're wearing masks and they're spaced out and there's sneeze guards and everything is set up, then you feel safe for sure. But then you think like, well, if these guys are really taking it seriously, I'm going to go ahead and shop in this store. So that to me is kind of number one with a bullet. Then the other thing, we were talking about this, but you have to nail the obvious right now for the next 3 months. But I think, like Kim was talking about, you should once you're doing that, you should still be looking at new and innovative things. Like, how can we drive people to the store? The whole idea of that InTime did, with FaceTiming and things like that. I mean, I think you really have to start to look at that too, as like, what is after this? We get people over the fact that they're safe, the employees are safe. Then how can we draw them back into stores? Because they're going to shop online now. I mean, 20-some% increase compared to 2 months ago. So, I think that we got to keep the innovation button down, even if it's like 5-10% of what we do for the next 3 months.
There was one more thing I wanted to bring up, which was, I don't know if some of you saw it, that Beta, the retailer Beta, Vibhu Norby, he had spoken at RetailSpace a few years ago. They put out a site yesterday. I think it's called Safe Stores or Safe Space. You can put it in the chat or email it out. That they're actually ranking. They went out independently and they're looking at all the retailers and what they're doing to ensure the safety of customers and their associates. And it was maybe a little unfair, I would say, because a lot of stores are just getting reopened and maybe it's a little too soon to do that. But I do think that that's going to be a big thing. And I'd almost imagine maybe down the line, it could be embedded within Google, right? That if you're searching for stores, dine in, pick up, take out, like how are people going to be ranking the safety of it? And
well, even like within the Google My Business interface, there's a very popular review area, and I can guarantee that you're going to start seeing people note in customer reviews what they saw in that experience.
Yeah. So I want to thank you guys for your time. I do want to especially thank Lee Peterson, WD Partners. They've been supporters of us from the beginning in a number of our spaces event, retail spaces, restaurant spaces. They do have a white paper coming out on the future. The store of the future is not a store. It's normally priced, what is that, $99,999. But today, if you check out their
Zero, yeah.
Zero. You can get it there. I don't think it's ready yet, so I know that page sends you to Wayfind. But they're always doing a lot of good research on this, and they've been talking about buy online, pick up in store, BOPIS, and converting your stores to fulfillment centers for a long time. So Lee, thank you WD Partners for being a great supporter. Kim, thank you for your time. Kim spoke at our first Retail Spaces event. I'll never forget that, in Key West. And Chris has been with us a couple of times now, and always great to have Google's insights. All right, guys. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. This is our first time doing this. Again, thank you so much. We'll be doing, rolling these out more in the future. Hopefully we'll figure out how to bring people live on the screen. But we'd love your feedback. There's a little survey at the end. Let us know topics or things that we can do to improve this, and stay safe. Take care.
All right.